Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Andy Kusser and I'm the Senior Program Officer at the Hive at SpringPoint Partners. At SpringPoint, we are deeply invested in young people and this transformative period of adolescence. We know we can help create a world that is better designed for and designed alongside young people. We aim to lift up amazing practices and rethink systems that our young people touch in ways that intentionally support this incredible period of development. We're thrilled to partner with each of you to make this possible. So last year, we hosted many of you for a series of brain science kind of 101 trainings. And some of the feedback received was, can you go deeper into some of these topics? So we heard you, and this was the genesis of the webinar series on adolescent brain science. In each of these sessions, we'll look at a topic with greater detail, share the knowledge of the scientific community, and offer the opportunity for you all to ask the guest lecturer questions that come to mind. We hope these sessions will inspire reflection about how this topic applies to you and your work, and offer the open invitation to reach out to us to follow up with any ideas, thoughts, or relevant conversation. In a moment, I will turn it over to Dr. Fellini, but a few housekeeping things. We've set aside some time at the end for Q&A. During the Q&A part of the webinar, we'll stop recording. We'll ask you to feel free to raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you to ask your question. Or you can utilize the Q&A button in Zoom to leave your questions throughout the presentation so that we can circle back to them. So with that, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Andrew Fellini, a co-director of the Center of the Developing Adolescent at UCLA. Dr. Fellini's research and work is helping us understand this new wave of adolescent science and how it translates to practice and policy. In his work, he also convenes the leading adolescent scientists from around the country, some of which we hope to bring into this webinar series, to strategically translate this emerging work and collaboratively equip leaders, practitioners, and adults everywhere with the science of adolescence that they need. We're very excited to have him with us today. So once again, I will wrap up my introduction with a huge appreciation for each of you for joining us. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Fellini.
Thanks, Andy. It's a thrill to be here, and we're really, on behalf of the UCLA Center for the Developing Adolescent, I just want to share that we are really thrilled to be able to continue this collaboration with SpringPoint and to learn about all the exciting work that is being done for young people in the Philadelphia area and even more broadly, and how we can share the science of adolescence to help support our young people thrive. Let me just confirm that my slides look okay and everyone can hear me fine. Good. Thank you for the thumbs up. Well, again, it's really a real treat to be back in community with many of you. We had the wonderful opportunity to get to know many of you during our time in Philly, where a series of events last fall, and really looking forward to this opportunity to get a little bit more deeply into this particular topic of the science of contribution. And we touched upon this in some of our earlier sessions when we met with you, and a lot of folks really resonated with the idea. A lot of you folks are already, this is sort of a fundamental part of your mission. And so sometimes some of the things I'll be sharing with you will be perhaps new to you. Some of them will be things that really hopefully support the work that you are already doing. And I look forward to sort of the chat and the Q&A in order to help inform us about how we can even ourselves learn a little bit more about what you're doing and how we can sort of make that jive with the science, or maybe we need to ask some additional scientific questions. So we at the UCLA Center for the Developing Adolescent, just as a reminder, our focus really is on translating and communicating the science of adolescence to help support young people. And we do this in community and in partnership with organizations like many of you here, with SpringPoint and other organizations around the country, so that we can really, number one, help folks to change their mind about the opportunity of adolescence, really fundamentally rethink about what the importance of this period of life is. And then secondly, to perhaps get a little bit more deeper into some more specific topics that help support the work you do, and perhaps even elevate that a little bit more as you try to make the arguments for making more supportive investments for our young people. So what we're going to do today is talk about the science of contribution. I'm going to start off by sort of leveling us all back up a little bit by what we talked about last fall. I just sort of remind some of the highlights that we talked about last fall. And then I'll get really a lot more deeply into what we know about the science of contribution, what we know about the neuroscience, the behavioral science, what it does for young people, how we can best support young people through giving them opportunities to contribute in a variety of different aspects of your lives. And then we'll have a Q&A afterwards so we can have some communication about this. So let's sort of jump in and move forward. So as a reminder, many of you, it's good for us to sort of get on the same page what we mean when we're talking about adolescence. When we talk about adolescence these days, we're really talking about the period of from 10 to 25 years of age. As we talked about before, many of us are hitting puberty a lot earlier than we did before 50 or 75 years ago. Roughly speaking, we think about early adolescence as generally speaking as when the time of puberty begins, and that could really happen on a range from anywhere from 10 to 12 years of age for young women and perhaps a year or so later for young men. We also think about it roughly beginning around the time of middle school, continues on through the high school years. And as more and more folks are pursuing higher education, and as it's taking longer time to find a solid paying career occupation, we really think about the end of adolescence really extending even into the mid 20s. And as we've learned about neuroscience, a lot of the fundamental aspects of brain development really go on into the early to mid 20s. Why is adolescence special? As we all know, we actually are living in a world right now where there's a fair common agreement about the importance of supporting and investing in early childhood. Many of us have been around long enough to remember that this was not always the case. But today we do have a common agreement on the importance of supporting early childhood. And now, along with a lot of other folks like Spring Point and many of you, we're really trying to do for adolescents what was done for early childhood. Really convince people and give policymakers and practitioners a better understanding of how it's important to continue investing in our young people during the adolescent years, that it's a time of really great opportunity in which we can realize investments, both at the investments we make during adolescence, but also to help us realize the gains from those earlier investments in early childhood. That it doesn't simply end in early childhood. We need to continue to make that as investments as we move to the adolescent years. As many of you know, when we talk about adolescence, we spend a lot of time talking about the wonders of brain development during adolescence. And really, the best way to think about what's going on in adolescent brain development is that it's fundamentally a story of connection within the brain. We've all learned about different regions of the brain, probably. We've learned about things like the amygdala or the hippocampus or the prefrontal cortex, all of which have different kinds of functions. And the story of adolescence really is the continued refinement and the connectivity of these different kinds of systems, so that we can engage in the very complex decision making, emotion regulation, and as I'll talk about today, contributions that really make us important members of our community and make us well adapted and well functioning adults as we move into sort of the years of the 20s and the 30s. But of course, that story of connection within the brain really depends on the connection between the brain and between young people and their communities. A lot of these fundamental connections that enable us to make decisions, regulate our emotions, make plans, contribute to the larger community really depend upon our experiences that we have with our family, with our friends, in the communities, and at schools. And many of you, this is sort of our last slide to level up here, just to remind you all where we're going to be at. Many of you will remember these core developmental needs that we talk about, that all of these changes that take place during the adolescent years, all of these changes that take place biologically within the brain and socially, really, in many ways, we think we can boil them down into some core developmental needs that we have during adolescence. And really, these are experiences that we really need to have during adolescence to support the connecting brain and to help young people thrive. You may remember we talked about risk taking and exploring the world and testing out new ideas and experiences, that we're absolutely primed to do this during the adolescent years. We need to build decision making and emotion regulation skills. We need to form values, goals, and our identity. These are critical parts of what happens during the adolescent years. We also need sufficient sleep to support mental health and physical well-being. So a lot of the concerns we have these days about mental health or physical well-being of our young people, it's critical for us to be talking about the importance of sleep, whether our young people are having enough time and space and whether they have enough conditions to have healthy and good sleep. It's very important for us to find respect among peers and adults and to obtain support from parents and caring adults. And then finally, we need opportunities to find meaning and purpose through contributions. And today, this is really what we're going to be diving into. This is what the title of the talk today focused on, and that is the importance of having avenues to develop a sense of meaning or purpose by contributing to peers, families, and communities. So let's get into that. I think it's very helpful for us to start off. What are we talking about when we use the term contribution? Why are we not using words like helping? Why are we not using words like pro-social behavior and so on? We're using the term contribution because it's very expansive and it really reflects the importance of doing a lot of things that really kind of boil down to things that give us opportunity to give time to people, to give resources and information that may impact others in our larger social world. So this can include things like helping with tasks and other duties. It could be helping out around the house. It could be working on a club that supports your community. It could be working in student government. It could be other kinds of things that really just simply help the larger group, your family, your friends, your communities, sort of to get things done. It could be providing guidance and support to another person. This could be to your younger sibling who has never been to high school before. You've experienced high school. You're going to support them to thinking about how they're going to manage their time. What does really homework mean during the high school years? What are the good teachers you want to pay attention to? How can you make good connections and so on and so on? It could be supporting your friends who are going through a difficult time. It could be 5 words that help your friend to get through the next class period. That is a contribution that can make an important difference in your friends' lives. It could be something as simple as sharing news or sharing gossip with one another. Did you hear that so and so made the team? Did you hear that this teacher is going to be retiring next year? What does it mean to us? Did you hear about what's going on in the community? Did you hear about this new club that's being formed? Do you want to get involved in it? All of these very simple kinds of things of giving information to one another, if you reflect upon that, that is contributing to other people's lives. And when we do this for other people, or when we receive that news, it's very, very useful and important to us. It could be offering opinions and ideas. It could be in the classroom, giving the chance to give your opinion on a class discussion. It could be within the family, and you're thinking about what you're going to be doing on the weekend as a family. It could be having the opportunity to have a contribution to that particular idea. It could be offering ideas about what you should be focusing on during the class during that particular class period or a particular class project, or if you are engaged in problem or project-based learning, contributing your ideas and opinions to that project. It doesn't mean their opinion is going to be taken up. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to do what you say, but having the chance to offer your opinion or your ideas in a larger group discussion is a contribution that is very important to us. It could be simply acknowledging other people's successes. It could be, wow, you did a great job in that presentation at school. Nice job. It could be 6 words acknowledging a person's contribution and other people's success. Nice job in that game. You did an incredible job, even though you didn't win the game, or perhaps other kinds of activities that you engage in, or nice job helping to clean that room. 3 words. All of these simple things can make a difference in young people's lives. And it could also be achieving in ways that help other individuals or groups. So it could be that you do well in school and it really brings a sense of honor or value to your family, that they are very proud of what you did. It could be that you graduated from high school. It could be that you've been promoted from 10th grade to 11th grade. It could be all of these kinds of things that you know are going to help other individuals and other groups. So the idea is that this idea of contribution is intended to be very comprehensive. It's intended to really capture the ideas that there are both formal ways that we can contribute, say in the classroom or in a community service project or a service learning project, or it could be very, very informal on a day-to-day basis. And it does not always require someone in need. And I just put this there because I think this is very important. Sometimes when we think about contribution, we immediately go to something like service learning activity, or making a donation to a group that's in need, or helping someone that's in distress. But a contribution does not necessarily mean that someone has to be in need. So for example, it could be that you're a member of a team. You may not get off that bench through the entire game, but by participating in practice and giving your teammates opportunities to work with one another, practice with one another, you are helping that individual group perhaps be prepared for the next game. It doesn't mean that they're in need, but it is still a fundamental contribution. right? So I think it's important for us to think, when we think about contribution, to go beyond simply the idea that we're only helping people in need or groups in need, but it really is a fundamental question of, are you impacting the social world in which you reside, your family, your friends, your community, or your school? So why is it important during adolescence? In a lot of ways, this is important throughout the lifespan. Many of us have had toddlers, or you have cousins or young, or friends with kids. You know that that 2-year-old wants to contribute, right? If you're trying to work in the kitchen and trying to get dinner done, that 2-year-old sometimes is going to pull up that stool and is going to want to get their hands dirty. So we want to do this all the time throughout life. And we also know at the end of life, it's very important for our senior members of our community to stay contributing. And it's actually a very fundamental part of well-being during later on during adulthood. But why should it be particularly important during the adolescent years? Well, in a lot of ways, compared to early in childhood, we have more experience and more skills in providing support to one another. Okay. So this is more than just a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old or even a 9-year-old. We have had a lot of experience of what it takes to help the family. We've learned what the family might need help in and how you can support it. We also have learned a lot more about math or English or social studies so that we can contribute to a group discussion. We also perhaps have been on a team or a member of a club by the time that they were in high school. So we have more experiences and skills in providing support, so such that that support and that contribution can be more important and effectual. We shouldn't deny the fact that physical maturity expands the ways that we can help, right? So many of us, as we get older, are asked to help more consequentially, so I should say, within the family or at the school. So you may be having higher level duties at home. You don't want to have that 4-year-old mow the lawn, right? But a 12-year-old may be able to do that. Um, Simply the fact that you're now tall, you can go to that upper shelf and help your mom pull down something they need from the upper shelf to help in the cooking. There's a lot more things that we can do to expand our ways to help the school, to our communities, and so on. These contributions, in turn, can become much more impactful upon the family, friends, and the communities. If our parents work long hours and we need to cook dinner for our siblings that particular day, that is incredibly helpful to the family to be able to do that, right? If we can help our friends by tutoring them or helping them go through a particular difficult math problems so they can get through that dreaded Algebra 1 class, which we all know is a big barrier for a lot of our students. That is very, very impactful. The fact that we can visit a senior center and spend time with them, read to them or talk to them and hear about their stories, very, very impactful upon that person to give them the opportunity to share their experiences in their lives. And we also have increased understanding of others' needs, lives, others' needs, concerns, and perspectives. So we talk sometimes of how much of the cognitive abilities that we have during adulthood are actually in place by 16 years of age. But actually, what is very interesting is that our ability to understand other people's needs, concerns, and perspectives will continue on as we go through the high school years and on into the early 20s. And then finally, we all know about the very important social orientation that we have during adolescence, that we want to spend time with our friends, but that social orientation really includes a very strong motivation to help other people. So these last two things, perspective taking, thinking about other people's needs and our motivation to help other people, a lot of that can be identified within this increased connection between fundamental systems within the developing brain. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about neuroscience here. This is only going to be the only brain slide that I'm going to show you during this particular talk. But if you were here for the other presentations, you'll see this is perhaps a deeper dive into what we talked about earlier. These are three fundamental regions of the brain that capture what's going on and really some fundamental aspects of thinking about and doing things for other people. Let's start with the green. This is the ventral striatum. In a lot of ways, represents our motivational desires and our rewards that we have from engaging in different kinds of experiences in our day-to-day life. In our earlier presentations, we talked about chocolate, we talked about being attracted to other people, and that may activate our reward system during adolescence. But at the same time, helping other people will activate the very same system. And some of us may be familiar with the idea of the warm glow of giving, the good feeling that we have from doing things for other people. When we help other people, this is the region and the system that tends to be active, this ventral striatum. But at the same time, if we go to the blue, the temporal parietal junction, there will be a quiz at the end of this talk. If you can remember temporal parietal junction, or if you want to be really hip as a neuroscientist, just say TPJ instead of temporal parietal junction. This is part of the brain that's located in sort of, I would say, the upper part, a little bit past the midpoint of the cortex toward a little, um, uh, you can see there on the blue. And those systems tend to be involved in how we think about other people, what they need, and how we can best help them. And so that allows us to understand what their particular needs are. And then these two systems will feed into and send signals into the medial prefrontal cortex. And this is the idea of how do we get these inputs from the striatum about the desire to help other people, thinking about what they need, and how are we going to make a plan in order to help support them. And also, as I'll get to in a little bit later, how do we understand and think about and reflect upon what we've done for other people, how it impacts them, and how it makes us feel and how it impacts us. So these are just examples of how making contributions to other people really promote the kind of connections between these fundamental systems of the developing brain during adolescence that we really want to have happen during the teenage years. So I'm going to go through a list of a few things that we know that contributions does for other people, for young people. It's really fascinating across the board. It really supports a lot of positive aspects of adjustment. Giving resources, support, and ideas will predict higher levels of academic motivation and achievement, better psychological well-being, even better physical health. We've seen this in correlational studies. We've seen this with intervention studies, and that will have a more strong suggestion of a causal impact, and really very consistently seems to be supported with these very fundamental aspects of adjustment. If we think through key psychological developments of the adolescent period, we know that it is also very important for these kinds of things. We know that it's important to develop identity during the adolescent years. And we need to remember that our social roles that are associated with our identity, who we are, where we belong, who we are a member of, includes both our rights and our responsibilities to that larger social group. So many aspects of identity involve both what we get, but also what we give back as a function of that identity. Being effectual and feeling like you have an impact is aided by contribution. You can see the impact that your activities may have on other people. We know that a developing sense of agency is fundamental for the adolescent years. Also, it's very important for intimacy. And as we grow older and we develop more complex romantic and intimate relationships with other people, we realize that relationships require give as well as take. So relationships will provide us with important sources of emotional support, but they also give us opportunities to give back and to support other people. So what's really fascinating about some of the science about close relationships these days is that historically we've always focused on what kinds of support do they provide to people. But actually, there's really great work to suggest that when you're in an intimate relationship, in a close relationship, it gives you the opportunity to support other people. And that in turn is going to be very promotive of these positive psychological aspects of mental health. It's also very important for social integration as we go through the high school years and we look at what predicts whether or not a student or a young person is accepted by their peers or not very well accepted by their peers. Increasingly, as we get older, it's based more and more and more upon kindness and contribution and doing things for other people. That those who tend to be more highly accepted and more involved in a tight social network are more likely to be rated as high in terms of kindness and doing things for other people. Um, Generativity is an interesting thing to think about for young people. We think about it traditionally for toward the end of life as we're thinking about what we've done during our life and whether or not we've made an impact and can give back to other people. But if, as we all know, those of us who spend a lot of time with young people, you don't need to talk to young people very long about what they want to do in their life and till you get to this discussion of wanting to have an impact upon the world. We may not know how we're going to have an impact or the way in which we want to have an impact upon the world, but it's a dominant theme of adolescent narratives of talking about their lives and what they want to do for other people. And finally, a sense of meaning or purpose is really very strongly predicted by contributing to other people. In fact, is perhaps the strongest predictor of having a sense of meaning or purpose. I'm just going to highlight this report that our National Scientific Council put out on cultivating purpose in adolescence. Um, we talk a lot about a sense of purpose because it's really important to get this idea of a sense of purpose during adolescence. Not that we need to know exactly what we're going to do by the age of 18. In fact, none of us know exactly what we're going to do by the age of 25, 30, 40, or 50. But the idea that one is acting purposeful and that is thinking about what they can do and how they want to move forward is very positive for well-being and adjustment. A sense of purpose is a self-organizing and forward-looking life aim. It stimulates goals and helps ones to manage our behaviors. Um, the sense and content of our purpose can and will change. And the idea here is for young people, it really requires cultivation and nurturance. And if you're more interested in purpose, we encourage you to take a look at this report by the National Scientific Council. We have a lot of additional other materials that sort of based upon that report that talk about purpose. But it's very important for us today to be remembering that a sense of purpose is really fundamentally supported by having opportunities to contribute. The other thing I want to highlight that what contributing does for us is that it makes us feel needed and it makes us feel very useful. And I'm just highlighting this because many times when we think about mental health and well-being and for young people, and we think about, for example, aspects of self-esteem, or do you think that you're a person of worth, which is very important for us to cultivate during the years of adolescence. That sense of worth in many ways is related to feeling that we are needed by other people, that we are useful to other people. And my particular research group here and some other folks around the country have increasingly tried to dive into this. And we'll ask young people questions like, how much do you feel needed by your family and friends? How much do you feel needed and useful by your family and friends? Do you feel that you can contribute to your family and friends? And we have found that helping family and friends will predict a greater sense of feeling needed and useful. And feeling and needed and useful will predict a variety of different aspects of psychological well-being. It could be a higher sense of self-esteem, a higher sense of purpose and meaning. It also predicts less loneliness and less depression. So in many ways, this idea that others need you, it's not just what you take from other people, but others need you, is really a fundamental aspect of psychological well-being throughout the lifespan. But we really need to give respect to the idea that this is really a fundamental aspect of psychological development during the adolescent years as well. So for all of these reasons, I and a lot of other people really tend to focus a lot on this idea that adolescents have a fundamental need to contribute to the social world. Um, the question really is whether adolescents actually have the chance to provide resources and support to other people in their everyday lives. So my question for you, and this is something you can just take a moment and reflect upon, put into the chat. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time focusing on it right now, but I'm very interested in you sharing with one another this the answer to this question. Why don't we talk more about this? Why in policy discussions or community discussions, why don't we talk more about adolescents' need to contribute? Why don't we think about this as a larger society? Or if we already do, you can highlight that how you talk about it in your community. But I do think this idea that in addition to needing help and support themselves, adolescents need the opportunity to provide that support, resources, and ideas to other people. So think about this for a second. We'll take a moment. If you have any thoughts, throw them in the chat, or you can hold on to it and we can talk about it in the Q&A. People think adolescents are able to contribute in quote unquote valuable ways. I do think that's an issue, whether or not we think adolescents' contributions can be as valuable as an adult's. I think this is a key point that is just made here, that adolescents need to be cared for, rather I think that's a very complicated idea. Hopefully we can unpack that a little bit in the Q&A. How do we move from caring for, or how do we broaden the idea of caring for someone is actually giving them the opportunity to give back to other people? Great. We have a lot of great ideas that are popping up there. Keep throwing that into the chat. I'm going to keep moving along, but I want you to be thinking about this. Okay, if we think that adolescents need opportunities to contribute, hopefully I've convinced you of that. I think many of you were already convinced of that before you came to this, because I do know it's fundamental to the work of many of your organizations. And we know that contribution will lead to better psychological, social, and physical functioning. Then we really need to think about providing adolescents with opportunities to contribute. And these opportunities really need to be existing throughout different aspects of their lives, whether it's in their community, with their friends, with their family, or in their schools. And there's actually pretty good research out there to suggest that in order for them to be most effective for young people, they should be authentic. That means they need to be real. They can't just be make work. They need to be scaffolded, meaning that they need to be supported. But we need to scaffold young people such that it's going to be a different kind of opportunity to contribute for a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old, or an 18-year-old based upon their maturity and their abilities. We need to support agency. That is, young people need to be part of thinking about how we can best design a program to support contribution. And very interestingly, these opportunities need to encourage reflection, that we need opportunities to think about, well, what did you do? The fact that you visited a variety of senior centers over the past year in your community, what do you think it did for them? And what do you think it did for you? That young people are developing these cognitive skills to really reflect and savor up on these very positive experiences in their lives. And programs that support contribution that seem to be most effective are ones that tend to encourage reflection. And I'm just going to throw out there, a lot of you have seen this before, and I've already talked about this in the beginning of the slide, that in many ways a well-designed program that supports contribution could meet a lot of these other developmental needs that we're talking about. Okay, an opportunity to contribute that allows you to explore the world. You have to build decision making when you're working with a team. It can help you fulfill your ideas about your identity. How are you going to pursue your identity? A good program will provide support from parents and other caring adults, and it's a good way to find respect among peers and adults that you're having an impact upon other people. I think it's also important for us to identify the reality that there are inequalities and opportunities to contribute. So they're not just inequalities of the resources that we provide to young people, but there are inequalities in the opportunities that we provide young people to give back to their communities and to the settings in their lives. This could be, and we should just ask ourselves all the time, I think, are there inequalities in a variety of different kinds of ways? Are there inequalities in resources that allow for student participatory learning practices? We all know that those are complex learning experiences to um, uh, uh, provide to young people in classrooms. We need resources and time to do that. Are we giving our schools and our staff the opportunities to do that? Are there enough extracurricular activities that provide students the chance to make contributions? Are there inequalities in service learning activities and high quality employment that give you a sense of contribution? And also, are there inequalities in adolescents' perceptions that their contributions are welcomed and valued? So this is an important thing for us to be thinking about as well. But at the same time, many communities have well-established ways to promote contribution, even if we are facing inequalities in different aspects of our social structures and settings. One of our communities I just want to highlight are young people from immigrant families. And in many ways, family contributions is very significant in many immigrant families, regardless of where they come from. Adolescents in immigrant families help their families daily, on a daily basis. It could be with childcare, it could be with cooking, it could be with taking care of the household, also financial support to the family during the teenage years and during the transition to adulthood. Helping the family provides a strong sense of purpose and motivation for young people from immigrant families. And contributing to the family really is a key element of cultural and ethnic identity for many young people from immigrant families. And you may remember this quote if you were there for our earlier presentations in Philly, but I'm just going to throw it up there again. This is from a 14-year-old from a Mexican immigrant family. And he says, though they did so much for us, especially my dad, they worked so hard just to get where we are, and I really appreciate that. And I mean, the way I can pay them back right now is to get good grades if I do what I'm supposed to. But I want to give them more than that when I get older, like their own house, or I don't know, a maid or something. Many of you who work with young people from immigrant families will hear this all the time. It does not take a lot of time as we're talking to young people from immigrant families to get this sense of obligation to the family, this idea that one provides a sense, that one has a strong sense of identity with the family and one wants to contribute to the family. I'm just going to flash this slide up here for you to think about as we're thinking about providing opportunities to contribute to our young people. It's important for us to recognize that many of our communities already have well-established ways to support contribution, and we need to lift those up and to think about that as we move forward. I'm just going to close with a couple of caveats here. Contribution may be less beneficial if it is too much responsibility at a given age, and I think we need to reflect upon that and think about that. It could, if it interferes with other important activities. So, for example, if working to support the family is at such a high level that it makes it difficult to either finish high school or to attend and finish college, that could be an issue for many young people. And it's important for us to be thinking about that. And how do we design structures that acknowledge that need to contribute to the family so that we can enable young people to pursue their educational pathways? If it occurs because of stress or group dysfunction, sometimes young people are asked to step up simply because the family, because of external pressures or perhaps because of internal stress, is not able to function well. If young people have to support their families or other kinds of in other kinds of settings at a very high level, because of that, that could be a lot of burden for young people to bear. And if it's a kind of activity where it's really difficult to obtain a sense of meaning or purpose, if it's at such a high level, if it's too many hours, if it's too onerous, if the supervision of the activity is not very positive, that can make it difficult for us to obtain a sense of meaning and purpose. So I'm just going to close there. I'm just going to highlight, many of you are familiar with our STEPS resource, the Science to Enhance Policy Success. We have a lot of resources on our website on a variety of different topics. We do have a spotlight on contribution that talks about why we should design policy and programs to allow adolescents to contribute to others. And includes a couple of policy insights and program examples that you can take a look at as you begin to reflect upon the ways in which you may want to support contribution in your particular programs. That's just the second page, and it highlights a particular interesting program that was designed to support black young people that incorporated a very strong sense of opportunities to contribute. And I'm just going to close there. If you're interested in more resources on contribution and other things that we're talking about, here's the QR code. Here's the website that I'm referring to. I'm going to leave that up for a second as we begin the conversation. I'm just going to stop there. Thank you.